Today we're going to look at how the writing you already do in your classroom will support students when they take the FSA assessment in March. Our goals are to understand the FSA assessment, what it looks like, what students are required to review the writing standards for literacy in history, social studies, science, and technical subjects, to become familiar with the FSA writing rubric, to discuss how students effectively respond to a writing prompt, and to discuss the instructional implications for academic writing in your classroom. The assessment is going to be administered to grades 9, 10, and 11 this year. It is a graduation requirement to pass this assessment in total at the 10th grade level. The 11th grade, it is not part of their graduation requirement. The assessment length will be 90 minutes. The state has said that they will allow 30 additional minutes for any student who requests it, regardless of whether they have an ESE IEP or have a 504 plan. The task itself will involve reading several pieces of text or looking at several visual images, graphs, charts, pictures, and the such, and then reading a prompt and responding to the prompt based on the information in those text pieces that they're looking at. It will be on the computer. They will have a paper planning sheet and pencil available to them, and the window for the assessment at this time is from March 2nd to 13th. We don't have the exact date at this time. The writing assessment is administered on a separate day from the other FSA assessment, which focuses on the reading, listening, and speaking standards. The FSA writing score will be part of the total FSA score reported from the state. As you know, in the past, FCAT writing has been a separate score, which was never combined with the FCAT score, and some students perceived it as not being important. So it is important our students know is going to be part of their total FSA score. The specific weight assigned to the writing portion has not been determined yet. As soon as we know that, we'll share the information with you. And in preparation for this FSA writing assessment, the 9th and 10th graders will be taking a mock computer-based FSA writing assessment on January 28th. It is being administered through Data Warehouse and generated from the district. And we're going to try to make it look as much like the FSA assessment according to the test item specs as possible so students can practice that in a timed setting. When the assessment goes to the state to be scored, at grades 8, 9, and 11, they were going to be scored by one person, a human, and they are also piloting an artificial intelligence or a computer scoring. For those grades, the human score always trumps the computer score if they are just one score apart. If they are 2 or 3 scores apart, for example, a 6 and a 9, then it would go to a further review and be reviewed by another person. In grade 10, because it is a graduation requirement and the score is going to be part of their FSA total score, 2 humans are scoring it. And the same thing for adjacent scores. If they are side-by-side scores, a 5 and a 6, then the high score will win. And if the scores are not adjacent, it goes on to further review. So the assessment will contain a writing prompt, and it will reference between 2 and 4 different texts or visuals. These are termed writing stimuli, so whatever the student has to look at and understand, whether it's a picture, a chart, a graph, or text, they will have to refer to that when they're answering their prompt. The word count for 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, the minimum word count is 1,100 words. And to give you some perspective, that's about 3 to 3¼ typed pages double-spaced. Maximum word count for 9th grade is 1,900, and for 10th and 11th is 2,000 words. So, of course, that's about 6 pages double-spaced, which is a lot of reading to digest before students start writing to the prompt. Let's look real quickly reviewing the writing standards for literacy in history, social studies, science, and technical subjects. As you all know, in your content area, you have reading standards. Here's the reading standards for history and social studies, and then you have reading standards for science and technical subjects. The writing standards are clustered together with all the subjects. So the writing standards are for literacy and history, social studies, science, and technical subjects. Within that strand of writing standards, you have 4 clusters. The first cluster is text types and purposes. Here's where we'll find the specs for what is contained in an argumentative essay and what's contained in an informational or an explanatory essay. Production and distribution of writing, research to build and present knowledge, and then ranges of writing. And that basically means how much writing students do. We should be giving them short writings, long writings, and over different types of topics. This page contains direct links to each one of the standards in the clusters. So in text types and purposes, you have 2 standards. Production and distribution, you have 3 standards. Research to build and present knowledge, you have 3 standards. In a range of writing, there is only 1 standard. So you can look at those at your leisure. If you're referring back to your curriculum map, you will notice perhaps that yours say LACC, which is Language Arts Common Core. The verbiage is virtually the same. There may be a little bit of difference. So you are still looking at basically the same standard, even though your curriculum map may not have updated this acronym to FS. The rubric with which the students are going to be assessed is called an analytical rubric, and it has 3 domains. The first domain is purpose, focus, and organization, and it's abbreviated to PFO. It's on a 4-point scale, with 3 being the proficiency level. The second domain is evidence and elaboration, abbreviated to EE, and that also is on a 4-point scale, with 3 being proficient. The third domain is conventions of standard English, simply referred to as conventions, and it is on a 2-point scale, with 2 being proficient. So if you add all this up, you get 10 points. The most a student could score on this rubric is 10 points. A student is proficient, if you notice, at 8 points, 3 plus 3 plus 2. So 8 is proficient on the state's writing assessment rubric. This is a condensed version of the rubric, just so we can fit it all on one page and you can get the big picture. Here are your domains: purpose, focus, and organization, or PFO, evidence and elaboration, or E&E, and conventions of standard English, or conventions. You'll notice that the highlighted parts are the proficiency column, and you'll also notice that conventions of standard English is the only one that has a possible score of 0. As long as students are putting something on the paper, they cannot score a 0 at this time. We have had discussions at the district level about if a student plagiarizes the whole piece, what happens, and the state is looking into that issue. But at this point, there is no 0 score for purpose, focus, and organization, or evidence and elaboration. If you are interested in looking at the complete rubric online, here is the link. You received copies of these rubrics earlier in the year, but if you'll notice here, we have a vertical alignment, purpose, focus, and organization, going from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, and then evidence and elaboration going vertically as well. You'll notice that under conventions, there is no 4 or 3, because as we said, its scale is from 2 to 0. And so there is a link for the argumentation rubric and the informational rubric on this page. So as we mentioned, the possible score is 10 points. Proficient is 8. The reporting from the state at this point is going to be a single number. Students and teachers will not be able to see how students scored in each of the domains. They will just be given a total score. The county has asked that they break that out. Whether that happens or not, we'll see later. As an instructional piece, if you're using this in your classroom, each of the domains should be scored separately if you're using the rubric as a whole. And that way students can see where their strengths are and where they need extra support as opposed to just getting a total score. This type of rubric is very good at providing specific feedback, and it is based on aggregate domain scores. If you look at your whole class and look at the PFO or for the entire class, you might find that they're fine with that, but in their evidence and elaboration across the board, your class is not doing well, and that's where you'd provide the extra support. You can also use the rubric just with one domain. So give an assignment and say, I'm only grading evidence and elaboration on this, and use the rubric to grade that particular domain. The difference between a holistic and an analytical scoring rubric is that this analytical rubric breaks the paper down into its constituent parts, looking at the domains. It allows you to give extra specific feedback to students. And you can also use it as a progress monitoring tool. So if you're trying to build their capacity to put in effective evidence and elaborate properly, then you can just score on that and look at their progress through the year. It is, in fact, a more time-consuming rubric. However, it is much more informational. Your holistic rubric, you score the whole paper as a whole. The weaknesses and strengths balance each other out, and it really isn't quite as informative to either you or the student as the analytic rubric is. So let's see how students should be responding to a writing prompt. In their academic writing, they need to have some kind of pre-writing plan. Students really need to sift together all the information that they've gotten from their sources before they start writing. It's not going to be the same type of plan for each student. Some people like outlines, some people like bubble maps. Whatever it is, a student needs to have a plan. Students need to be able to balance between textual evidence that they pull from their text and their own original idea or elaboration on that textual evidence. This one right here is where we're seeing a need for a lot of growth with our students. Their academic writing should not be just a summary of the text, unless that's what you intend for them to do. But if you are giving them a writing prompt and they have to respond to it, it should not include a summary of the text. It should not include extensive copying word for word from the text, and we've already gone through the whole plagiarism issue with the language arts classes. Using direct quotes is perfectly okay as long as they are relevant to the response and they're connected by the student's own original writing. So they pull a quote from the text, they put it into their writing, and then they analyze why that quote supports their position. And students always have to acknowledge when they take information from the text. In the case of FSA writing, it does not have to be an MLA internal citation. It can simply be something like the author stated that, and then say what the author stated. Or in paragraph 2, it says just something so that the reader knows that they are taking information from the text. The difference between evidence and elaboration is that evidence is taken from the text and it shows the author's thinking. Elaboration or analysis or interpretation, whichever word you want to use, comes from the student's own thinking, and it shows why they chose the specific elements of the author's work to include in their work. And so it illustrates the student's thinking. And this is the part that seems to be a problem for our students. We're getting very good at pulling textual evidence from the text. That seems to be moving along very nicely. The elaboration piece is where we need to be helping students. So as we were talking in our reading coaches meetings, we were discussing what do students need when they sit in front of the computer for the FSA. And some of our mid to low students will look there and not really know how to organize their time, not know where to begin. So let's look at what they need to be doing in that 90-minute period. They will be presented with reading or visuals, text or visuals, and a writing prompt. So the very first thing they need to do is dissect the prompt to be sure that the task is understood. What am I supposed to be writing about? What do I need to be doing? They need to determine what they're asked to write about and whether it's informative or argumentative. So they have to understand the standards, what's included, what's going to be assessed for an informative piece, what's going to be assessed for an argumentative piece. Do they have a claim? Do they have a counterclaim? That sort of thing. And they have to determine if there's more than one task in the prompt. Are they asked to identify something and then analyze it? What exactly is being asked of them? The second thing they need to do is to read and reread the passages. So you notice they read the prompt first and understand what they're going to be doing. That gives them a purpose for reading. Then they reread if they don't understand everything the first time. Then they use some sort of pre-writing organization, as we talked about before. Whatever works for them is fine. They're going to be given a blank piece of paper. So they should have developed some sort of strategy for pre-writing prior to them sitting at that FSA assessment. And then how are they going to cite their evidence? As we mentioned before, it's very simple. The author stated, or in paragraph 2, they don't have to do MLA citations. So let's look at this writing prompt. Read the text below regarding the use of dietary supplements. Write an argumentative essay either in support of the use of dietary supplements or against their use. Your essay must include relevant ideas, concepts, and information from the passage set. So between you, take a moment to discuss what words in the prompt must the student identify in order to write an effective essay. So just take a minute to do that, or 30 seconds. What words do they need to focus on? All right, now think about this and discuss it for 30 seconds. What doesn't this prompt explicitly state that the student must know in order to effectively complete the essay at a proficient level according to the FSA writing rubric? So what are the implied things that they need to know? All right, let's go ahead and look at that. In the prompt, they need to read. It's an action they have to perform. They have to write. They have to know that it's an argumentative essay, so it has to be in an argumentative essay format. And they realize that they have to include relevant ideas and concepts from the passage set. And here, the set means they have to rely on all of the text or visuals, writing stimuli, not just one piece. So they have to pull text information from all of them. What must they know that's not explicitly stated? First of all, they have to know how to write an essay that has a beginning, middle, and an end, and that it contains effective transitions. This is part of the standard. Then they have to know the structure of an argumentative essay. They have to understand that it has a claim, a counterclaim, and must provide supporting evidence, and it must be cited. And how to formally give credit to the source, informally give credit to the source for their textual evidence. An example would be the author states in the second paragraph that. So they need to know all of these things before ever reading this prompt, because a prompt does not instruct them in what an essay is or what an argumentative essay is. So that's why their knowledge of the standards is pretty important. Instructional implications for you to help our students. The students, to be an effective writer, have to be familiar with the standards, the writing strand for content area. They have to be familiar with and have multiple experiences being assessed by the FSA writing rubric. So they have to know how their writing is going to be assessed. They need to adopt a pre-writing tool, whatever works for them. They have to understand strategies and skills of effective academic writing. They have to understand raft, and we've talked about this before. They need to know their role as the writer. They need to know their audience. They need to know what format it's going to be in and what the topic is. They need to know how to effectively paraphrase to avoid plagiarism. They need to know how to cite evidence. In this case, it will be informal citation. Oops, sorry about that. And they have to be able to incorporate their elaboration. of their evidence. That is their analytical thinking. That is why they chose the pieces of textual evidence to put into their writing. So those are things that you're probably already addressing in your classroom. Now, as we move forward to the FSA assessment, if you need any assistance with any of these specific skills or strategies, I'll be happy to come in and assist you with them. If you need any help with any of this information, please give me a call and I'll be glad to help you. Have a great day.